This is All India Radio. In the program Spotlight Now, we bring you a discussion on Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojna and its outreach. The participants are Ashok Tandon, political analyst, and Ruchika Chitravanshi, journalist.
Been a major relief for poor sections of the society, especially struggling during the COVID-19 pandemic. Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Monday had announced that government will extend the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Ann Yojna, which basically distributes wheat and rice free of cost to people, will be extended till November. Ashok Tandonji, can you tell us a little bit about this scheme? When was it launched and who are the people who are going to benefit by this scheme?
First of all, in his address to the nation on Monday, Prime Minister made it very clear that in this time of pandemic, his government is standing by the poor. And therefore, the idea is that nobody should live without food. That was the purpose of extending this scheme. And he said that by November, that means till November, Diwali, food will be available in fixed quantities every month to more than 80 crore countrymen. And as we know, that the scheme was earlier rolled out for 3 months from April 2020, soon after the nationwide lockdown was announced to combat COVID-19. The scheme was later extended till November 2020. But again in June 30th, 2020, in a televised address to the nation, the Prime Minister said over 90,000 crore will be spent on this program extension. As we all know, that this scheme was first announced by the Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman on 25th of March 2020, and that was part of an economic relief package of 1,70,000 crore for the poor population and migrant workers. Remember, in those days, there was an issue of migrant workers returning to their native villages, etc. So it was in that context that this scheme was announced, and since then 5 kilograms of free wheat is provided to 80 crore people along with 1 kilogram of chana per family. 50,000 crore was already spent on providing employment opportunities to the poor. As this was also part of the overall relief package which Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman announced. Maintenance cleaners, nurses, ASHA workers, paramedics, technicians, doctors, specialists and other health associated workers, they were given a health cover of 50 lakhs. So I think we have to see the whole scheme in its totality. So 2/3 of India's population is being covered under the scheme. And the only thing people need to do was, and they were told to do was that they have to open a Jan Dhan account in bank, which are of course notified by the Reserve Bank of India. And if you look at it, then all the wage earners that earn below 15,000 a month, even in businesses, and have less than 100 workers, they were all paid 24% of their monthly wages into their provident fund. So this comprehensive relief package covered so many things. So I think these are very fascinating features of this scheme which the Prime Minister had unveiled. And the idea behind it is that all those who live below poverty line must get the relief, and all those who have very modest income should also get the benefit, particularly during the pandemic.
So as Ashok Tandonji, you said that 5 kg food grains per person per month will be provided free of cost to about 80 crore beneficiaries. So what are the requirements, the documents, etc. that a person needs to produce? You said that below poverty line and people who don't have the means to meet these ends, how can they get this benefit? Where do they have to go to get this benefit?
Only requirement is that they must have an account under the Jan Dhan Yojna. That was the minimum requirement. Soon after Narendra Modi became the Prime Minister, the Jan Dhan Yojna was launched on a very massive scale. And therefore, the process is very simple for everyone to avail. Now, an applicant was required just to open a Jan Dhan account in any bank authorized by the RBI. And during this process, the only thing which the applicant needs to furnish was the income document that will further just be screened. And once the completion of the screening is done, it is confirmed that the applicant is eligible for the Yojna. So I think that is a very simple process because much before the scheme was launched, the Jan Dhan Yojna had already been in operation. And that is why it became very easy to avail this scheme, and people have been benefiting from this scheme for a long time now. And let me say that this perhaps is one of the major reasons why during the second wave there has been no migration back to the villages, and therefore the construction work and other things continued. Therefore, this time, second wave of pandemic, people were assured and they were getting these benefits, and that is why I think there was a general feeling of satisfaction among the poor people this time.
So Jan-Dhan account is required to basically furnish sort of an ID proof, you're saying, in order to get the food grains, or will it be like a transfer into their bank accounts through which they can buy these food grains?
See, in fact, under this Yojna, 8 crore poor families were also supplied gas cylinders free of cost. So the wage earners that earn below 15,000 a month, and those who are running the businesses and have less than 100 workers, they were in fact paid 24% of their monthly wages into their provident fund account also. I think the distribution system was left to the states, and wage workers, all these people, and even for farmers. Let me recall that over 8 crore farmers benefited under this scheme with direct cash transfer. An installment of 2,000 rupees is sent to these farmers in the first week of April in their account. And women self-help groups under the Deen Dayal Yojna, who were earlier eligible for similar loans up to rupees 10 lakhs, they were allocated with a collateral free loan of 20 lakhs. A total of 20 crore women holding Jan-Dhan Yojna accounts. They got a payment of rupees 500 for 3 months from the launch of the scheme directly into their account. See, the middleman gone, and therefore people were feeling confident that the money is actually coming directly to them. And even for the Manrega workers also. And Manrega workers, their wages were decided to be 2,000 per worker were given. And it eventually benefited 5 crore of Indian families. I think the scheme which the finance minister announced at that time also included that a PF withdrawal limit was enhanced even for construction workers. The Yojna provided a fund of rupees 31,000 crore to assist 3.5 crore registered workers to protect them against any economic disruption. So a huge benefit to a cross-section of the society, particularly the poor and wage earners and those who are in all these categories.
So coming back to the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojna, the scheme, as we know, was reintroduced in May-June because, as you mentioned rightly, the impact of second wave of pandemic was something government was wary of and wanted to protect the poorer section of the society. Now the cost for those 2 months was more than 25,000 crore. With the scheme being extended till Diwali, till November, how much cost increase will be there, and what will be the impact of this increase on overall expenditure of the country?
The earlier extension, the amount on the exchequer rose to about 90,000 crore. Now, although the Prime Minister did not outline the extra expenditure which will be incurred due to the extension of the scheme further till Diwali, I think sooner or later we'll get something from the Finance Ministry how much it's going to cost the exchequer. But I think when the Prime Minister announced about the free vaccine, the cost factor has not remained very relevant. When the center is now buying directly all the vaccines and giving it to the states for free, similarly under this scheme, when Prime Minister announced his extension till Diwali now, obviously he must have taken into account the extra burden on the exchequer. And for that, I think perhaps seems to be the limit to help the poor sections of the society during this pandemic. And therefore, very soon we will learn how much extra burden it's going to cost the exchequer.
Now, obviously, there is expenditure side, but the other side is also the supply side. Now, one difference this time around is that pulses are not part of this free distribution scheme. Maybe, of course, the stocks are an issue. But overall, for the grains, what is the supply looking like? And what is the kind of supply that we'd require to take this scheme till November?
See, I think the supply aspect was left to the states. And that is why the distribution has not, seen any complication. And since the provisions were made directly to the states and they were responsible for its proper distribution, And I think so far we have not heard any complaint. Even the non-BJP ruled states have not complained about this scheme. And there has been no allegation of discrimination by the center in the distribution of these provisions.
So I understand that the Food Corporation of India would play an important role in the whole supply of these food grains right now. What is the mechanism?
Certainly, as we know, the Food Corporation of India has always been instrumental in procurement of food grain and then making it available to the states for distribution, whether it was public distribution system or directly purchased by the state government. But under this scheme, the FCI, at the instance and direction of the central government, will allocate this food grain quota to respective states for distribution further at the grassroots level. So I think the system is foolproof. It has worked very well since it was launched. So far it has been working good. And we do hope that in the coming months also, there will not be any problem for the people to get whatever has been allocated to them.
And how crucial will the role of the states be now? And what are the challenges that you think that states have to overcome? Because ultimately it is the states who have to implement this distribution to the right people.
If you look at the distribution of the vaccine, states have the infrastructure in place. And that is why all the states have welcomed the Prime Minister's decision to center to procure the vaccine and give it to the states for vaccination program. And therefore, there is no reason why the states will not be, making a proper arrangement. Similarly, under this scheme also, when the provisions of the food grains are being made by the center, it's being given at the doorstep of the state government. The state government have the infrastructure to distribute it properly. So therefore, I think this is a cooperative federalism which we are working in. And therefore, states are equally responsible. And they have been, doing their job very responsible manner, irrespective of the party in power. In fact, the states welcome such initiatives by the center because they don't have to spend any money for that. Once the provisions, financial allocations are being made by the center, the provisions of the food grain, etc., and also the vaccine, there is no reason why the state government should raise any question. And I think that is exactly the perfect example of cooperative federalism which we are working. And I do hope that the interest of the poor are paramount for all the state governments as it is for the central government. So both will be working in tandem and the people will be benefited, particularly at the grassroots level, poor people who have no means to raise money under this pandemic and therefore they need help and the help is being provided. And I think that has been appreciated by many countries in the world that a developing country like India is allocating so much of money for the welfare of the poor and the system is working perfectly well. That seems to be a very great example how a developing country of India's size can take care of its people.
And this particular scheme now we've extended it till Diwali, which is quite a few months in a go that we have done this. Do you see it getting extended further or maybe the situation will stabilize? How will the government react to the evolving situations?
I think we'll have to wait and watch because things are improving. The second wave is subsiding. Situation is returning to normal as far as the economic activity is concerned. But still, the apprehension and fear of another wave is still there. And therefore, keeping our fingers crossed. But the Prime Minister has extended it till Diwali or maybe even Chhath as it was done last year. So therefore, we do hope that beyond Diwali, things may be in a much, much better situation. And we may not have to extend the scheme, but the fact remains that the government is always working on these lines. And in case of any exigency beyond Diwali, the government, I think, will not hesitate in extending further.
Hopefully that doesn't happen and we have a good control over the situation. And this scheme, we hope, will benefit those who are in dire need during the pandemic. Thank you so much, Mr. Tandon, for joining us today.
Thank you.
You were listening to a discussion on Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojna and its outreach. The participants were Ashok Tandon, political analyst, and Ruchika Chitravanshi, journalist. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. You can listen to it on our mobile app, News on AIR. This program is also available on our website, newsonair.nic.in. You may email your opinion about this program at airnsdtalks@gmail.com.